Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many wonderful faces here. Thank God it's not as cold as it has been, I will say that much. Good evening. I wanted to start out by saying how grateful we are to be standing in a community that has an opportunity for success, when so many communities around us do not have that same opportunity. We're standing in a building that's not very old, in a community that rather has difficulties, but growing with success, and not very many communities in Ohio can share that same opportunity. So I just wanted to take a moment to be grateful for why we're here today, to vision and take a hold of growth for the future. I appreciate you all spending your Wednesday evening with us, treasuring what we all love, our community. Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life of what we give." My name is Donald Berger, and I am your Vice President of Marysville City Council. When I ran for City Council in 2016, before the soundbite, I pledged we would protect the small town charm, preservation, community identity, and create a promising future. When so many communities are struggling, I am grateful we have the opportunity here tonight to fulfill our promise we made together, our residents, City Council, City of Marysville, and community leaders. Marysville is at a time to be bold, sharing big ideas, creating a plan to stand the test of time, a 25-year vision. We are pledging a promise to ourselves and future generations that old ideas, development patterns, and outdated policy will not be our future. Instead, we will embrace creativity. For those who have the ability to see into the future will be the ones who guide us into the future. This plan showcases the best of who we are and where we are headed together. We must stand together, united, as we embark on endless opportunity. There is no doubt we will have discussion and hurdles, but we are Marysville, the city who founded a global company. There is nothing we cannot do if we stand together. Thank you to so many people who have been engaged in the visioning process. Your shared insights are highly valued. Thank you to council, city staff, community leaders for your work and commitment. We have all enjoyed working along Ed and Realm, and I'm excited to have your passion and effort shared with us tonight. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the presentation this evening.
Well, hello, everyone. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. I see family, I see friends, I see people that have been part of the visioning process because we had community engagement sessions. And so, this whole process is really important, especially in terms of just engaging you. And so tonight, one of our goals really is to continue that engagement. So we will be presenting a lot. We have more slides than we ever wanted to have. And so we'll try to zip through things pretty quickly. There's just a lot of content. This process started a long time ago. And you'll see some of the people that have been involved: City Council, City Administration, and then our names up here, Ed Michelson. Again, I'm from Marysville, originally been around for about 28 years. And then Carmine Russo with Realm Collaborative. So I'm going to start here with an image. And I want you to think back 25 years ago, okay? I came here in 1998 in January, so a little bit longer than that. And Marysville looked a lot different 25 years ago. Now, 25 years ago, to some people, if you're older like me, it seems like, it just seems like, boy, that was not that long ago. But if you're like a teenager or something, it's like, of course, that's like, I wasn't born yet, those kinds of things. But as I look at those circles, anybody can identify some of those circles, like that one up at the top there? Anybody know what that is? The very top circle, can anybody say what that is? Mill Valley. Mill Valley North didn't exist, okay? How about the one over on the left? What's that circle? Anybody know what that is? Kroger, okay. We had a Kroger, but we moved it, right? And then you start looking around. We didn't have the Innovation Park. Coleman's Crossing wasn't there. City Gate wasn't there. We're looking up at the top there. I think that's Scott's Farms. I mean, that was under construction. Things were much different. So I bring this up from the standpoint, it's like we're looking 25 years into the future. And in some ways, that's going to go fast, okay? So as we show things tonight, I want you to keep in mind a couple of things. One is that we're going to be provocative. The things that we're showing tonight are going to be like, whoa, are we really going to do that? And in some cases, what we're trying to do is we're trying to show opportunities, and we're trying to get you guys to maybe think outside the box a little bit from what we've done before. Some of the stuff you may say, oh, that looks like it's crazy. Well, guess what? It doesn't even have to happen, but it might. You know, it's the whole idea is like, what are the possibilities? So we're going to zip through this. So again, where were you? Think about where you were 25 years ago, and then think about 25 years from now. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about why the vision. Of course, some of this stuff you've heard before. It depends on if you've been in some of our meetings. A little bit about our charge, like in other words, based upon the fact that there needs to be a vision, like why are we involved and what's our part? And then we've broken this into phases. Okay, so the first phase was really about discovery, which is the things like analysis. So we analyze the city, take a look at streets, take a look at parks, take a look at everything. There's also research that's involved, and we'll talk a little bit about our trip to Holland, Michigan with a group of people from the city and city leaders. And then there's a lot of listening, so that's the engagement part, which some of you have been involved in some of our engagement sessions. And then what we've been doing most recently, this is since May, after we went to Holland, is we've been focusing really on developing a vision statement, core values, guiding principles, a framework plan, you'll see that, and also some visual concepts, which you probably saw if you walked down the hall and stopped and looked a little bit about with some of the visuals there. Next steps, and then Q&A. So we start with what do we see? And this is some of these slides are from the very beginning. This, I think I made a presentation, I think it was like June of 24 to the city. And this was one of the slides that we used. It has to do with what are our strengths, challenges, and opportunities. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And when it comes to strengths, Marysville has a lot of strengths. And Donald, you were starting to talk about that a little bit. The things that we have, a lot of communities don't have. We've had strong planning. We really have. The 2018 comprehensive plan has been the guide for many, many years, and now we're moving to update that. Economic development. We've had a lot of economic. Everybody knows that stuff is coming our way. We are in the center of the bullseye when it comes to development. Programming for events. If you've been to the Uptown Friday nights, I think they usually get like somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people to come to those, and they're always like amazing, and they're getting better, those kinds of things. And then recent developments, like the very building that we're in right now, the Avalon. We've done some alley improvements. One of the things that we're trying to do is improve our canopy of trees in the city. A lot has been done in that regard. So there's some real positives going on. And then in terms of what the city has been investing, I got about 3 slides here that kind of highlight that. So you'll see that there have been some strategic property acquisitions. And this has been done in order to take advantage of properties that are strategic for future redevelopment. And so you'll see some things like the Hometown Auto, Crazy Scotty's, Minute Lube, Marysville Steel, those kinds of properties. And we'll talk about those later. Facade improvements, a lot of focus on the Uptown especially. And then public space and parks, a lot of investment there. Uptown investments, a couple of gas stations have been removed on 5th Street, and then a whole bunch of infrastructure projects that have been done, $20 million roughly over the last 15 years. So with that said, a lot of good things happening. There's still challenges. There are always challenges, and there always will be challenges, but we want to see if we can fix some of those. So the whole idea was, again, we started with talking about the importance of vision, balancing economic development planning, and then the third leg of the stool is design. And we'll discuss that in more detail. Quality of life, you'll hear that a lot in this presentation because that's really important. Getting ahead of development pressure. We've had a lot of development pressure, right? There's a lot of things coming at us. And can we get ahead of that? Instead of like being reactionary, can we get ahead of it? And then creating a city identity. So right now, the image is on the left.
Their left.
Their left. That's why I had to like turn. I'll figure out my left and right.
Yeah.
That's Marysville today. And some of those at the top, our uptown, I think, is one of the things we're probably most proud of. I mean, we really have good bones in terms of the historic buildings in the uptown. There's not a lot of critical mass there, like if you compare it to some of the other towns, even Bellefontaine and Urbana and some places like that seem like maybe they have more. But the quality of what we do have on those floor blocks is really, really good. But at the same time, it looks a little stark. When you start to compare it to Burlington, Vermont, which my son took me there this year. I actually walked that street. German Village you're probably familiar with, and we went to Holland. So some of these places, when you start to look at kind of the comparison of the two, you can see, I think you can see a difference. Okay, so this is, again, a slide I showed early on to convince the city that the vision is important. And again, we're strong in economic development, strong in planning, but from being in Marysville for 28 years, one of the areas that I think that we could really kind of boost a bit more is just this idea of design, and that's what you're going to be seeing tonight, is some ideas about taking things from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions when you're starting to think about where does our city want to go. I mean, a 2-dimensional plan, typically in planning, it's very 2-dimensional, and you say, okay, the blue area you're going to have housing, and the red area you're going to have, office or something like that. Well, that tells you something about where things need to go, but it doesn't tell you probably enough, is kind of what we're getting at. So this was from the 2018 comprehensive plan. And this is a really interesting slide, I thought, because at the time, just like we were doing, we were asking the community how they felt about things, okay? And so one of the really important questions, which I agree with them in asking, is how do you feel about the quality of life? And at that time, they got a 6.6, which you go, well, that's better than 50%, right? It's 66%, whatever. But if it was a school grade, you wouldn't like it very well. I mean, if you got a 66% on your math test, that wouldn't be so great. So the question we asked is, how do we go from 6.6 to 9? And what we're getting at is that we feel that quality of place directly affects quality of life. And so that's something that we're talking about. So when it comes to the charge, or what we're looking at is, can we create a development vision that is authentic? I hear it all the time. It's like, we don't want to be Dublin. We don't want to be New Albany. We want to be Marysville. And I totally agree with that. So this idea of authentic was going to come up again and again. It needs to be challenging. In other words, we need to raise our expectations because we have all this potential. A lot of potential that other cities would die for. We have it. And that's what we have to understand is, like, there are only 8 growing counties in Ohio, and we happen to be one of those counties, and we're actually the fastest growing percentage-wise of any of those counties. So we're kind of like, again, the bullseye thing. And it needs to be enduring, something that's lasting. So this little jingle right here came to me when I was driving up to Marysville one day from all this discussion we're having, and it's like, we're not just any town. We're not just any town. Look at all the potential we have. Look at how people have their eyes on Marysville for opportunity and development and those kinds of things. We're not just any town. And once that kind of sinks in, I know, there's a lot of discussion about growth, and do we want it, do we don't want it? Well, growth is coming. And, if we don't have this vision plan, it's still going to come. If we just disappear from the stage, it's still coming. It's just a matter of whether we want to shape it or not. So we are the land of opportunity, and that's how we think of it. So when we say that, if you study this chart a little bit, you'll see 2020, right where we are right now, I think we're around 28,000 people, something like that. I think that's kind of where we're at. But if you look out to 2050, which is that 25-year period, we're projected to be 42,000. That's a lot more people. And the question is, where are those people going to reside? They're going to reside somewhere. Is it going to be on the perimeter? Is it going to be in the middle? Where is it going to reside? And so that's something that we have to honestly look at. And then in terms of assets, we have some fantastic assets. Again, when you look at these assets, cities with other cities would love to have this. There's so many cities that just don't have that economic engine that we have, and our economic engine is growing. We have advanced manufacturing, agriculture, which is part of our heritage, automotive, foreign investment, small business research and development. That's all here in Marysville. And it's really great. So what we're asking is that this is really about imagining, dreaming a bit. What are the possibilities? We're not prescribing anything. As you see images tonight, or even the images you saw as you're coming in today, we're not prescribing anything. What this really is meant to do is provoke conversation with us as a community. Can we sit down together and say, hey, you showed that. Can we talk about that? This isn't like somebody trying to tell you what to do. This is your community. I still consider Marysville my community, even though I live outside the limits now, but I care about this community, and I think you guys do too, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So words that come up again, authentic, we talked about that. Thoughtful. Thoughtful, what's behind thoughtful is the idea that we do have conversations. When development is coming, when opportunities are coming our way, that we have community conversations, and we set things up such that we have more conversations before we just shoot from the hip and say, oh, let's just do this. Because everything should be looked at in context, right? So a big part of what we're trying to do through this vision is to start to say, what could be, what are the framework ideas, what are the things we believe in, what are the things that we want as a community, and then how do we evaluate that? Or in some cases, do we go and pursue certain kinds of development that we want versus waiting for somebody to come and talk to us? And then this idea of vibrant, which is a really important word we'll talk about later, because when we did the surveys, when you guys were involved with the community engagement, the word vibrant jumped out, and you'll see that. Quality of place, when we went to Holland, for instance, there's lots of great examples, even here in Central Ohio, and you've all been places where you go, wow, that was so fun going to Virginia or wherever it was, and you went to this really cool town, and it's kind of like, man, I wish we could have some of that. And then, what is it going to take? It's going to take people. It's going to take you. It's going to take city staff. It's going to take our city council. It's going to take experts and people that are from the design community, and a lot of people to make it happen. It's also going to take process. Like the processes we have today are not necessarily the processes that we want for the future. We need to have more engagement with the community, more conversation, and be more thoughtful about how we do things. And then, as I said before, we need to start leading instead of just responding to things. Because there's a big difference there. And I think the vision is all about that, is can we get ahead of it? Can we decide what we want? And then can we pursue that? Okay, so that's what we're discussing. All right, I hope I'm about done talking because it's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, it's almost my turn.
So we just stand at a pivotal moment. That's what we're saying. It's a pivotal moment, and the vision planning is important. And so ultimately, I'll just point out a couple of words here in terms of the charge. We're using a community design lens. Again, those three circles that I showed earlier, the community design lens is the one that's kind of the new lens that we're involved with. And then the other one is about establishing expectations. And I think we should have high expectations. I don't think we have to be Dublin, but they have high expectations, and you can see the results of that. And I don't think our expectations should be any less. That's just what I think. Maybe you think differently, we'll talk about that. But we don't have to be the same thing, but we should have high expectations for the future. And then ultimately, quality environments lead to better quality of life. That's a given. In terms of what it's going to take in terms of success, the vision plan is a big part of that. So that's what I've been talking about. But also the processes, you see the administrative processes and the private sector partnerships, those are critical. When we went to Holland, we talked a lot about that, or they actually shared with us things that they've done. They're like 30 years ahead of us in terms they were at the same spot, or even maybe in a worse spot than we were back in the day. Because now everybody goes to Holland, it's like, oh, you were always perfect, you know. They weren't. They had gang violence in Holland, Michigan, if you can believe that. So they had issues too. So all three of these are important. So creating a visual community design, you'll see that. Developing new community engagement processes. We want more of that. Attracting private sector partners, and then taking the long-term view. And when we take the long-term view, one of the things that's really important is everything we do needs to be in context with what we decide that we want to be. and not just say, oh, we've got that site available, let's just put that there, that kind of thing. 2 phases I talked about earlier. On the right-hand side, this is very much a pastoral kind of slide because we've got the 3 Ps. Clancy, we've got the problem, the place, and the people. The pastors always do that. You never notice that? I just realized that we were doing the same thing. And then phase 2, so we've done all that, and now we've been in phase 2 where we're talking like ideas and strategies, and then coming up with those aspirations that are our aspirations, not somebody else's aspirations. Do I still talk?
You got 2 more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the first book we did. This is a discovery book. And this is in PDF form, or we actually have hard copies as well. So if you're interested, you can look through this. I think it's about 170 pages of information that covers a lot. It's the groundwork that we did before we jumped into the visioning part. And then the second book, this is the cover of the second book, and this one is going to be just as big, if not bigger than that. So there's just going to be a lot of information in there to get. So I'm going to turn this over to Carmine so I can take a break.
I'm going to give Ed a break, yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to walk you through this, and I'm going to go a little quicker because I want to get to the meat of like the design presentation. But we did want to highlight to you all the things that we've done in about the last 12 months. We've been here a lot. We've been here almost weekly. We've had open houses, community engagements. We're going to show you images of those. Some of those meetings you might have been at with us, and you've chatted with us. We've gotten to know, as Ed said earlier, a lot of people in town. And we've really started to develop a really deep connection with the place. So like I said, we had a core team workshop once a month with the group that Ed talked about earlier. We've had lots of work sessions with City Council over the past year. We've been at the Friday nights, Uptown Fridays in the summertime. We had a booth there. We'll show you images of that. And we had, direct interviews with civic groups, community groups, discovery phase open house, and work sessions. Actually, we went to the high school for a work session as well, which was really interesting. But Ed mentioned the Holland, Michigan trip. We took a group of city staff and council up to Holland, Michigan. Ed had a deep connection with some folks up there, and they gave us a really great tour. We had many, many meetings with nonprofit groups. We had meetings with the city, and even they have a local power generation plant there, and we went and toured that. But we boiled it down to 6 big points here, and Ed talked about these already, but everywhere we went, everyone knew about the vision plan for Holland that was built 30 plus years ago. And everybody knew what their role was and how they contributed to getting to that point. And so this vision plan was really a private sector and public sector joint vision plan, which is what we've done over the last 12 months and that process we worked through. Strategic planning and staffing, we know that to deliver on some of these things, there has to be some kind of look at the current staff trajectory for the city and how can you start to do some of these things and what are some of the pieces that you have to put into place to let that happen. One of the other biggest things was they focused on the core of their downtown. They felt like if they didn't have a great downtown, the rest of the city wasn't going to matter that much. And so when they were attracting new businesses to the city, that was the first place they took them. And so they invested a lot of time and effort and energy in that. And you'll see later that's one of the pillars of our plan here for Marysville. Infrastructure as an economic driver, Ed already mentioned some of the infrastructure improvements the city has already undertaken in the last 15 years. It has to continue, right? It has to keep going in that trajectory. Thinking about place-based investment, we'll talk about that specifically in a few slides. And then just this collaboration between government policies, how do you allow for some of the things to happen? When we get to next steps later, we'll talk about some of the things we have to do after this vision plan to start to provide the zoning and the design guidelines that allow for the things that we're starting to show you to actually take fruit in the future. So just images, we actually have a workshop set up at 117th West 6th, right? Yep. Which is just down the street here. We were just there before the meeting. This is where we have all of the workshops and all the things that we just showed you. We pin things on the wall. We take people's notes. We've had the staff there, like I said, the council. These were the Uptown Fridays where we had booths, where we took, you'll see, actually I forgot to mention our two staff members, Marissa and Elena, that are in the back that helped you get in tonight. They were at all of these meetings as well, but you can see they had comment cards there. We'll show you what those look like. And we just tried to have, as Ed always talks about, casual conversations with people about the future intentions for this plan. So you can see some of the notes off to the side here. We actually had a lot of young people come. Like, Ed really likes this middle one, and I know I do too, because little kids would come up and just tell you stuff they love about the city and stuff they'd like to see. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff to do. We just like a lot more cool stuff. And like in some ways, that's what we all think, right? I mean, but I think and it's just like we had all age groups. We had lots of people that actually were just coming to the Uptown Friday from another town, and they told us stuff they loved about Marysville when they come to visit, which was also helpful. These were some of those, focus groups we talked with, some of the civic groups. We had some of the private sector people like Bruce Daniels in to talk about things that he's thinking about, and just tried to get everybody's ideas, and some of the people are in the room with us tonight. Everybody has some kind of input that is really going to be valuable to us. We also toured with some of the city leadership, just local projects, like what are people doing around Central Ohio? What are some of the interesting, innovative ways people are thinking about housing and thinking about mixed-use developments? These were some of the open houses just like this. We had these at the health department, right, headquarters, which they had a nice big room there for us. So we had, civic organization groups. We had a big open house like this where we had, I think, almost like 150, maybe 200 people at this one. So some of you were at these. And then we had a phase 1 open house where I'll share some of these again tonight for those of you that didn't go to this. But those were some of the outcomes of the first phase, and then now we're talking about the second phase tonight. And then this was the high school group we met with, which was really fun and interesting. So I'll share with you some of the responses. So we had, interactive sessions where people were answering their phones when we would ask them these questions in these meetings. So this question was, in 25 years, what does Marysville look and feel like? And so the big words are the ones that got repeated the most in people's responses. And in one word, the one that Ed mentioned that was really stood out to us was the vibrant term. Safe home, that's really common things, but the vibrant was really important. And so we tried to unpack that a little bit. And so it's a city and a community that's alive, dynamic, and thriving, a place where social, economic, cultural, and environmental systems interact in a healthy, mutually reinforcing way. And so when you unpack that a little further, it's about all of these things, right? Creating active social environments, creating an economic vitality in the city, having cultural, these are all things that communities all throughout, the country, but probably the world really want. And these are the things that you aspire to be. Healthy environment, sense of belonging, adaptability. And so how do we bring that to the city? I think that's going to be really important when we get into some of the ideas. But like I said here, we met with more than probably 750 people, but that's what we could count in all of the surveys we got. We had online surveys, in-person surveys, like I said, interviews and focus groups. So these are some of the things we heard, and we're not going to go through all of the things because it would take many more hours to go through everybody's responses, but we tried to boil it down to the biggest things. There is nobody that we talk to that doesn't bring up the small town feel as a main attractor and a reason why people love this city. 41% in all those responses said, we must retain the small town charm. How do we do that while we're growing? So that's part of what we're trying to achieve today. What has Marysville done well? Parks and open spaces and entertainment in the community seems to always rank high. 40% of people say that. But not everything is positive, and so when you want to get to some challenging comments, it really always comes back to growth and development is where a lot of those things come. 44% of people that responded to the surveys talked about expressing concerns with the current growth trajectory in the city. Only 4.6% think that the current development strategies are being handled well. And so I think that is a really important point to say that's why we're here doing this work. The city recognizes we need to have more conversations, and they're smart that they hired us to help try to vet this out, I think, because a lot of communities don't address these things, and they're really trying to address this, which I think is really important. What are we missing? Seasonal entertainment options. People say, like, what about, we have great stuff in the summer, but it'd be great to do things all year long. Could we have more of that? What are areas that need to be improved? Parks and green space, entertainment, and I think these, again, we work in other cities. We're working in Powell right now, we're working in New Albany, we're working in Worthington. A lot of these similar things come up in other places. So these aren't exclusive to Marysville, but these are just things people said. People want to prioritize city infrastructure, which, as we mentioned a minute ago, the city has been doing and wants to do more of. When it comes to community assets, lots of people talk about green space, 23%, 21% responded with community trails. This one's interesting, the 17% on innovation, and I feel like we need to unpack that more, like what types of innovations do people want to see in public space? But the idea that there's a portion of the community that recognize that we could be doing some more innovative type things than other communities. And in 25 years, again, how do we 54%, how do we maintain that small town charm with smart, controlled growth strategies? We also ask people specific things about place. So when we get into the renderings, you'll see these things reflected in that. But we had a lot of these questions. We're not going to go through all of them, but we asked about the Uptown. What do people want to see? A lot of comments about more local places to eat and drink, places to shop. A lot of people mentioned historic preservation. They really like the old buildings. How do you retain that kind of character in some new buildings? When it comes to some of these like more office park type developments that occur maybe at the periphery of town, people want to see more green space, they want to see community trails, they want to see maybe innovation, sustainable landscape response there. When it comes to the housing stock, a lot of people respond with some of these more lower density, not really favoring the higher density, but a huge number of people respond in all the surveys about this kind of idea of village mixed use, where you mix retail with maybe a little bit of office, with maybe some residential, with maybe cluster homes. Like, people are really looking for those different types and sizes of houses where there's opportunity for young people to establish themselves and young families. In some of the focus groups, public-private partnerships, like when we talked with some of the CEO leadership in the town, quality environment seems to rank very high. It's like, how do we increase the quality of the space, which, as Ed mentioned, increases the quality of life? How do we have strategic growth? How do we get together and determine what are those types of new businesses and things you want to attract in the town? And then from the private sector, how can we be at the table more and help shape things with the public sector? Civic organizations, as you might imagine, say, yeah, we love more diverse cultural activities, but we lack the resources and the funding, so how can we find ways in which to find more sponsorships and resources, and how do we get more support for, if you want the all-season programming, we need to develop a system around that. And then we talk with some of the developers that are currently doing work here. We talk with New Albany Company, Connect Realty, and some of those folks, and they just mentioned that, they want to be more involved in that public-private, as it comes to investments in the infrastructure, having clearer processes for development and developing design guidelines and standards. And again, as it comes to development standards, having more of a unified vision about what the future wants to look like. So common themes, we'll go through these quickly. Pedestrian focus seems to be a very common theme of everyone. So again, we're not talking about particular building types, but the idea that we want to focus on walkability, and we want to focus on, again, the small town charm. Historic preservation is a big thing that a lot of the respondents talk about, like not just preserving the Uptown, but how do you preserve the historic character of some of the older homes in the Uptown and enhance that with anything that new might come. How do we have more of a diversity of uses on project sites? This diagram is really meant to depict that a lot of people talk about traffic issues in the town, but in reality, when you develop in more of a sprawling manner, everybody's driving everywhere. So if we have more of these walkable, we call village mixed-use centers, maybe that takes some of the pressure off of that traffic. This is just a graphic that shows you what we mean by that when we talk about village mixed use. In this image, you see a walkable downtown core, central green spaces, parks and fields, and everyone from the apartment building all the way down to the single family in the distance, but there's townhomes, and so you have the mixture of housing, and you're all utilizing the same resources, and everything is a little bit more walkable. It's not like there's not parking, because you can see how it's hidden behind those buildings, but it's not the emphasis. And how do you find the missing middle of housing? We have the Uptown, you've got single family off to the left here, but a lot of people we talk to say, hey, I want like a 1,200 square foot house, you can't find it. Well, how do we get that? And I think that's something that we should talk through. And what are the benefits of those mixed-use centers? It's not just about really liking to walk around, but it also has economic impacts. It has efficiency of design, which puts less pressure on infrastructure, and there's a lot more detail that'll come out in the booklet when it comes out and it's revealed online. But we talk about a lot of these, and I'm not going to get into all the details or we'll spend more time than we need to. But again, there is a lot of economic benefit to developing in this way, and that's why I think cities across the country, but also in Central Ohio, are starting to look at that kind of mixture of use. So again, small town feel, what does it feel like? We ask people that, but now it's our job to paint a picture for you of what small town feel might look like as the city continues to grow, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So 12 emerging ideas. And then we'll stop for a minute and ask questions, right? That's what we're going to do?
I think so.
And here, yeah, that's you.
All right, so here are the 12, okay, and I'm going to go through these. I'm not going to go through these right now, but here's a question for you. And so when I get to the end of the next 12 slides, I'm giving you guys a little bit of time so you can think about your answer. But of the 12 emerging ideas, which one resonates with you, okay? So I'm giving you plenty of time, so I expect a lot of hands to go up here, especially because my kids are here. I see you guys out there. I know you guys are going to raise your hand. And Andrea, I know you're going to raise your hand, and Tony. Okay, so I'll just go through these real quick. So this was interesting. So these are not, the first word is prioritize. These are not a priority thing, but these are just 12 ideas that kind of came to the surface. And as we had the community engagement, a lot of this stuff was talked about consistently. This idea of identity, and also that ties into our gateways. Like, how do you feel when you first come into Marysville? Like, one of the things that's, I'll just say it, it's one of my pet peeves is Delaware Avenue. Anybody love Delaware Avenue? It's not very, that's usually what people drive through. And there's not a tree to be found, and there's a lot of power lines, right? So, you know, our gateways are really important. Expand and enliven the uptown. We talked about the priority of uptown. And it is the number one priority. That is kind of our iconic center of our city, and it's got really good bones, but it continues to struggle. And the question is why, you know? And can we in the next 25 years see it become amazing? Because it has all that potential to do that. Transform Marysville North. You'll see this in a diagram. We did what we call a framework diagram, and we see a lot of potential in the Main Street corridor, especially from 33 down to the hospital. So another one is enhance the small town feel. Now this should look very familiar. You can see the Avalon Theater there. We don't have any trees in the uptown. There's not a tree to be found in the uptown. And it's mostly cars. Even sitting outside at outside of the halls or whatever, the marketplace.
Oh, marketplace.
You know, I mean, the trucks are flying by and it's just like loud and it's like, oh. It's all car oriented.
And we've had a lot of residents tell us that they won't sit out there because it's uncomfortable, because the car traffic, the smoke from the semi trucks, right? And so how do we get that to be a more hospitable environment for
And that's
people?
not really small town feel.
Yeah.
Mill Creek Corridor, that's another one that's a really big opportunity that I don't think we've really leveraged, and we'll talk about that. We have one of the highest ranked pluses for Marysville was the parks, and so people really appreciate our green spaces, but there's so much more potential, and there's a lot of interesting things that are being done, even in Central Ohio with some of our regional parks, that we could take advantage of some of the ideas that have been used there. Establish a healthy citywide tree canopy. There's my favorite street there, Delaware. With its power poles and hardly any trees, and can we change that over time? I mean, that's one of our key gateways into our city, and we should do something about that. A lot of talk about Marysville East and the New Albany Company, and a lot of these things coming up. Plus, we have the Innovation Park and those kinds of things. One of the things that we've been talking about, and it came out in some of the surveys, is can we make sure that those are not just enclaves that are out there that nobody goes to? Can we integrate trails and amenities that tie them into the city, that make them part of the city versus big plots of land that just nobody knows what's out there kind of thing? And I think there's opportunity there. Village mixed use, we'll talk about that all day long for all the reasons that we just discussed. More programming. One of the things I think, again, it was a big plus is the programming that's being done. The farmers markets are great. We talked about Uptown Friday nights, and there's other events, Festa Fair and those kinds of things. But can we do more of that? Because people really like that. And there's a real great sense of community when we have these kind of events. So can we do more with that? Expanding the civic realm. So this is a view. And we'll show more. This is a view from uptown looking down toward the hospital. And this idea of, do we have the right kinds of civic spaces? Like the space we're in right now tonight is awesome. This is great that we have a venue like this. But are there other things that we can have when it comes to our history, our heritage, nature centers, those kinds of things? And then the last one is, can we create a citywide mobility network? Right now, we're very car-centric. And wouldn't it be great as if you could go from your house, say it's out in Mill Valley, and you could get on a multi-use path and go anywhere in the city. And we should be shooting for that. And it's not just about bikes and pedestrians. There's all kinds of innovative stuff that's coming out in terms of mobility. And with Honda being one of our key international companies that's here, mobility is a big part of what they're about. So we should tap into the brains that we have regarding mobility. So, okay, I gave you plenty of time.
Yeah, so we wanted to stop for a minute and let you react to those before we jump into the next half of this.
Yeah. Plus, it gives us a little break from all these slides. So.
Can you put them up on the screen so we don't erroneously identify them?
That's a good idea.
Why don't you go back to the 12?
I'm going to go back to the very first one so you can kind of, hopefully you can read them.
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Good suggestion. Thank you. So here are the 12. What do you think? Anything jump out? What's important? Yes, sir.
The citywide mobility. My wife and I moved here in the summer of '94, and we had the opportunity of living in Colorado Springs for 3 years. And we thoroughly enjoyed all of the modes of transportation that were available to us within our neighborhood, within the city. There were parks, there were trails. You could go anywhere on your bike and get to any part of the city. Here in Marysville, we still like to bike ride, but to be honest, it's a little bit more dangerous. And that really should be one of the key factors that we should concentrate on to make it safer for everybody.
Very well said. Thank you.
I want to second that. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I've lived here since 1991. I've been a distance runner for many years, and I can tell you that it has deteriorated in terms of feeling safe as a runner or a rider, a bike rider in this community. So the number 12 really resonates with me, but I also want to say that I want all of it. So it's very hard to narrow it down. And I want to ask a question too.
Sure.
Because number 2, expand and enliven
Yes.
Uptown Marysville.
Yeah.
What exactly do we mean by expand?
Okay, I'll give an example. Right now, most of you are probably familiar with the Silos Project or the Water and Light, which is just north of the Uptown. And just, okay, so that's right where the Mill Creek Bridge is, right? And that's not that far from the Uptown. So there's a gap there. We have the post office. We have a number of other buildings there. Journal Tribune's in there. You might. And so, you know, and also there's the Amtrak. It's the
Potential for Amtrak
potential.
station.
You've heard about that possibility within the next 10 years. And it's been identified, or at least one of the options is to have like a depot right on Main right there. So there's like connect the dots kinds of things. And so there's some gaps in there and those kinds of things. And also, as you'll see in some of our images later, one of the things that we think is really important is we need more people living in the Uptown. A lot more people living in the Uptown for those businesses to really, really thrive. We don't have enough density. We just don't. And so there's some opportunities there. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about. And really, the goal of those expansions are really to fuel the center. I mean, the most important thing is not that they fuel themselves. They need to fuel the center and make the center great, because it's just sitting there with all this potential, and it's not getting there fast enough. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I do want to thank the city because on West 5th Street.
Okay.
And we just went through that, the bump outs and everything like that, and we are ecstatic. It has really changed the nature of that community significantly since those improvements have taken place. And when I say prioritize the gateways into the city, the secondary to that would be to prioritize the go-round for these trucks, these semis, all these things that don't need to be going through these towns and by these restaurants. So prioritize that we do have a bypass. We don't, we talked about a beltway back in the day. We don't have that, but we do have a bypass. So let's prioritize that as well and keep the city, and I would also say that the Uptown is the next thing, but I was on Uptown Revitalization Team and Team Marysville for years. It's a struggle, I can tell you. There are some deficits that you need to address.
Yeah.
But that's another discussion.
Yeah, thank you. In the back there, Clifford.
I really do like the feel of some of the historical buildings that we have that make Marysville unique. They may not last forever, and certainly anything that we build from now on, we have to perhaps look at in that light. So if we build something, we don't build it to last just 10 years and then we tear it down. But we need to be targeting some of the things that will add to the character of Marysville. If we're going to have a train station, make it one that becomes a landmark maybe. Look at these opportunities as we plan and develop to create those buildings that make Marysville unique.
Yeah, thanks, Clifford.
I think number 12 because usually when I would usually bike from my house because we live in Uptown. I would usually bike from my house to my school, which is near green pastures, and usually I do it every day. But then one day I was going on it and it's very bumpy on there, and when I was one time I was riding my bike to school, and then my back tire popped on my bike, and I had to someone had to come and pick up my bike and take it to the front of the school, and I had to walk there from there. And I just I think we should have a mobility where I can get from my house to my school or to my friend's house, Kavan's house, which Scott Hunter's son, without going through all the traffic and all that and getting there safely.
Good. Thank you.
We agree.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Couple more, and then we'll keep moving. That's good. Others? Got some hands? Any other ones? We're getting a lot on number 12.
Yeah.
That's my dad. He didn't pay me to say this though. I live here in Marysville. My wife and I do on Chestnut Street, and I really resonate with really 1 and 2 and I think 7 it was. I don't like the concrete jungle that we have going on right now. I walk to work. I think even if I didn't walk to work, I would want to walk to the downtown, and just that ability to walk in some form of nature, I think would vastly improve the downtown. So I'm excited about that idea, all those ideas, making, maybe power lines go away and more trees and just having that environment be more filled with nature versus just concrete would be awesome.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Jackie?
Definitely number 2. The heart of a city is critical to the advancement of a city. Coming from another small town in Ohio, in Northeast Ohio, where we went through a planning process similar to this a couple of years ago, and having moved here, we love Marysville. We came here a year and a half ago, and we love it because it reminds us of our hometown. The historic buildings, the downtown. But Louisville faced the same challenges of some of them decaying and some of them not being maintained. Small businesses don't thrive in a downtown if there's nobody there. So the mixed residential use of downtown. You've got to have people living downtown. It's not going to be large families. It's going to be young people who are establishing themselves in the adult community of ownership, possibly condominiums. But that expand and enliven your uptown Marysville is critical to we have to have a heart of the city. That's who Marysville is the heart of the city.
Yep.
So we've got to take care of that and promote that and make sure it maintains the lifeblood of the city. It's important.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. All right. One more, Steve,
Yeah,
and
maybe
then
one more.
maybe we'll move on because we've got a lot of slides, but I really appreciate the comments. These are great. Thank you.
I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that we've heard. I like the comments about number 12, and I think number 5, the Mill Creek corridor. I think that can be a tremendous asset for mobility. To tie the city together to try to create bicycle corridors or walking corridors, extremely difficult in a gridded city that we have. Everything to a great extent has to be on street, but the Mill Creek corridor can be a tremendous spine that we can get from the east side of town to the west side of town. That doesn't solve all the issues, but seems to me that's a big part of that citywide mobility network.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, a lot of potential. I agree. All right. Well, thanks for that. I think we probably need to keep moving. How are we doing for time here?
We're like at 7,
o'clock.
so
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
we're
here
gonna
we
need
go.
to pick
All right,
it up.
we're gonna fly. Here we
Yeah.
go. We'll get through it. We already did those.
Yeah.
Okay, thoughts, vision, principles. Okay, building on our past. Can we chart a bold future? Bold. Is this me?
It is you.
Okay. Respecting our roots, we talked about this before, preserving small town charm, leveraging opportunities. These are diagrams, sometimes we call these party diagrams, landscape architecture talk. But what we try to do is have these diagrams that kind of boil things down to the essence, along with some of our narratives. And you'll see we're talking about, there's a circle, a bar, and a squiggle, okay? That's kind of how I describe these, kind of weird. So the circle is our uptown core, the little red circle. The bar is, as I mentioned before, that's Main Street corridor from 33 down into the hospital. And then, as Steve was just talking about, the Mill Creek corridor and why we think these are really strong framework opportunities that we need to look at. And also, the outer circle is something we'll talk about too, that the kind of the bigger green circle. Small town feel, vibrant community, walkable mixed use. These are all things that start to take us in another direction that we haven't gone before, okay? We're largely apartments and we're largely single family, and that's about it. And there's a lot of other things that we can be doing. And density in our core is gonna be good for a lot of different reasons, as we've talked about. So now we're getting down to proposed vision, mission, and a framework diagram. So this is, in our world, this stuff is really important. Just like when you're gonna put together any kind of a goal, you need to make sure that the tip of the spear is as sharp as you can get it. So that's what we're really trying to do. And if this stuff isn't quite right, and you guys see things in this that aren't quite right, then I would like you to speak up, because we want this to be what you believe. We've taken the comments that you've given us and we've kind of crafted it. So it starts with this idea of Marysville aspires to be a vibrant, welcoming community that honors its heritage while shaping a future of thoughtful, well-planned growth. So this is specific to development. And when we're talking about this stuff, everything we're talking about is about development. So that's the tip of the spear, and it needs to be what you guys want. The mission, in other words, how do we actually do it? Through a spirit of collaboration and a commitment to excellence and quality of life, the city will pursue a more connected community, just talking about that, encourage creativity and steward its natural and built environments, creating a thriving and sustainable future for all. So that's what we're trying to do. And in addition to that, that diagram helps us understand a little bit about what our priorities are, and we'll put some meat on the bones there. These are also extremely important, super important, and they're kind of embedded in what we just read. And they're core values, and they're really about attitudes. Like when we think about our city and we think about where we want to go and what we want to be, we're about excellence. And that's what we need to tell people. Just what we talked with our friends up in Holland. They all had these. They knew exactly what they were about and where they were going and how they were going to work together to achieve that. So we're about excellence. We're about collaboration. We're not going to silo and somebody's doing this over here and somebody's doing this over here. We're going to talk to each other, and we're going to set up mechanisms where we can have community conversations where we know each other, we trust each other, and we talk about things. Being thoughtful. In other words, again, I talked before that we don't shoot from the hip. We go like, before we move this conversation forward, hey, we need to bring so-and-so in, and we need to bring these guys in because they need to contribute to this conversation. Adaptability. We have this framework plan, and we have these ideas that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. But things change. Things have to be dynamic, so we have to be adaptable to that. Creativity. We've got this city. We have a lot of engineers in our city. I don't know if we have that many landscape architects and architects. We have a lot of engineers. So creativity is really important, and we need to leverage that. And a lot of people that have come to our engagement groups have really contributed a lot of creativity. So we need to harness that. And then the last one is stewardship, and just making sure that we steward well both our built environments and our natural environments. So
That's mine. Yeah.
it's Carmine's turn.
Yeah, I'll give that another break.
I'm glad.
Yeah, well, I'll give you more time. You got more.
All right.
So part of our process and the framework thinking approach that we've applied when Ed shared the bubble diagrams of phase 1, phase 2, is we start at the most wide scale possible in thinking of a community, right? So we're looking at Union County first as a place and trying to get that position. And as we keep drilling down and go through the slides from here on forward, it keeps zooms in further and further and further until we get into the detail. So the first thing we look at is what makes this city great in its juxtaposition to Columbus and all the other cities around. And what we started to find was we did some research and we came up with this term called the exurban community, which I didn't know about before we started doing this work. So you may not know what the term means, but it really means that you are close and you feed off of, the metro of Columbus. You've got the Dublins and the others around you where there's like assets that are these other surrounding communities. But you also retain your own character because, you have your own infrastructure. There's been a lot, as we heard, over the time, like in the last 20 or more years, you've invested a lot in infrastructure, water, sewer, and all of that, which makes it a desirable place to grow, which we heard from some of the development community. So you have the ability to have your own identity, which is great, and you also can, play off of the strengths of the things that are around you. And so, as Ed mentioned in the 12 themes, how do we translate the 12 themes into something that's real, so as something that we could start to implement? So we talk about greenway systems. City of Columbus and the Franklin County is looking at this we're part of this effort with the Rapid 5, which was really looking at stream corridors and how those can become means of mobility and those can become means of connecting cities. You have the ability to connect to that larger plan that's happening within Columbus and Franklin County. There's also, we already mentioned the Amtrak and the idea of like the regional mobility network, which really needs to play up within the region. But then also that regional identity, like what is the spirit of this city and what does it mean to be in Marysville, so you can still develop that identity within some of the ideas that we're talking about tonight. And you can still become what we think, not just a premier exurban community in central Ohio, but perhaps throughout the country, at least in the region. And then in addition, continue to invest in that infrastructure, recognizing that the growth is still continuing to come. And then how do you have strategic land planning? We're going to talk about in a minute, Ed mentioned this earlier, the amount of people that are coming. It wasn't our job to be a part of this and say, we're stopping this growth. That's already kind of been something that the leadership of this county and the city has already understood that is happening. So it's our job to provide solutions to what we can do as it relates to housing, infrastructure, and all these things. So how do we be strategic about that future planning effort for that? So when we come to city scale recommendations, right now I think a lot of the projects that you see are things that happen with annexation areas or things that happen at the periphery. That's probably going to continue to happen in some form. But our plan is really focused on what can happen inward of that circle. So when you look at the top circle, when you think about the population growth, we think there's a lot of space to grow inward, and that means focusing on things like the uptown with new residential. So we made this diagram to really talk about that because it starts to inform some of the recommendations that you'll see in a minute, but it's like you're probably going to grow a little bit at the edges, but we really want to put that emphasis on the inward growth as well. There's also some things that we pulled from lots of the plans. So one of the things we did in the beginning was we looked at all of the previous planning efforts. The city has invested a lot in these. And so we wanted to pull out the pieces that can start to impact some of the recommendations. And one of the things that we noticed was that the thoroughfare plan from 23 calls for this connectivity on the south side. Maybe somebody even mentioned, like, how do you get traffic and divert it around, right? I don't know, Ed, if you want to add something there.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, recently, closer to the center of town, Professional Parkway was put in, and that's an example of providing a connector because we've got all these spider webs, all these spokes that come into the city, and sometimes you got to go all the way in to get all the way back out, which is kind of wild. And then, like we were talking before, are there ways that we can get all that truck traffic and all that kind of stuff diverted so we don't have it coming into our center? But go ahead.
Right, so there might be these ideas about that outward loop, but then also as we zoom in, you'll see there's other ways to divert traffic specifically around uptown that we started to look at. So one of the things that we started to develop was this idea of this greenway loop, which can be something that connects, as we mentioned it with the thoroughfare, but it can also be something that starts to create a gateway and an entry into the city. This didn't only come from us. You know, there were members of council that mentioned that, you know, this idea of how do we get more trees in the city? How do you start to recreate the shaded city that was like the Marysville was historically known for? And then also it becomes a means of, you know, like I said, transit and also mobility, and starts to define somewhat of an edge to, you know, where the city might want to be in the future. And what can happen inside that greenway? You know, it's not just trees, but it could be, you know, not just stream restoration, parks. Maybe there's some industrial activity that could look like that image there that can be surrounded by more sustainable landscape, like what people said they wanted to see. Maybe there's environmentally sustainable residential, a parkway component, trails, as we already talked about with the 12 themes. In addition, when you start to establish that, there become these areas of opportunity, right? We know that some of these areas have already been annexed, but we start to say, how do you develop a vision for those so that as people would start to propose something, there's something that they can guide their vision with. So we looked at these areas, and these are just meant to be for conversation, and I think that we started to define these because of some existing conditions that occur in these areas, but you know, up to the northeast, you know, there's some recreational parks and ball fields. You know, could there be a recreational zone, a new sports hub? We've heard a lot from community members that we want more things for the youth to do. So, you know,
and also Dublin has a big youth sports initiative that they're doing, and maybe there's some ways that we could tie into that.
Right. So this might be an idea of where to locate something like that. We already know with some of the light industrial properties to the east and some of the pink annexation zones that's happening. So how do we start to maybe leverage that for some other mixture of use and office in those zones? On the south, needing more housing, connecting to some existing housing. So how can you have something that has this more environmental feel? On the west, the ecological hub connected to MacGyver Woods and some of that existing condition. And then to the northwest, where the reservoir is, could you have something that has some more park-like feel surrounded by some new residential in those locations? So again, I hope you get the sense it's like this overtone of like the green and the walkability and the connection to green space, and how do you thoughtfully implement some of these other uses at the periphery, which thereby leads to this conversation about gateways, which we already talked about. Some of the gateways are on the Route 33 corridor, others come from the south, and how do you start to create those moments where people enter the city, which thereby leads to these, which are roadway corridors. And so, as we've already illustrated, you know, and maybe your son mentioned this a minute ago, but those roadway corridors are places. You know, it's not just a means for moving traffic. There's a feel, people can actually walk or cycle on those. So we wanted to define different characters for these roadways, and they start to impact the neighborhoods that surround them. So again, multimodal corridors may be coming in where you start to look at the mixture of mobility, but then start to have some tighter traffic lanes, maybe wider sidewalks as you go through the spectrum and you get closer into the uptown. And those can be designed intentionally so that as the city's looking at infrastructure improvements, we have a roadmap for what those things want to look like. So if you looked at the big spoke or the big circle that we mentioned, maybe there is traffic flow that can move about in that parkway. But as you get closer into the uptown, one of the things we learned about in Holland was they looked at their central Main Street, which is 8th Street there, I think, but
Yep,
here
it
it's 5th. And they said, how do we make this more walkable? And what they did was they took 2 adjacent parallel roads, much like what you have here, 4th and 6th, and said, we're going to try to divert some of that traffic onto those bypass roads so that that center heart of that core is going to be the most walkable, enjoyable, comfortable place to be. And so we started to look at that idea. There's already plans for the 5-point roundabout becoming a roundabout, which in a way starts to create a threshold into the uptown from the east. And so we started to even talk about, well, would you do something on the west that starts to give you this threshold so that as a motorist, as you drive into that circle, you automatically start to slow down, and then it transitions into something that's much more pedestrian friendly in the core. And so we started to get around this idea that maybe that would be possible in a long-term scenario, and that 5th Street could be reimagined. So I think what we're really saying, like the green streets are really like those more walkable core streets. And so the orange streets are like where we would be diverting some of the vehicular traffic to get around the uptown.
Yeah, and you can see it in the east-west and also in the north-south.
Yeah, in the north-south.
With Court Street, possibly. Right now, from London Avenue, we have that little zigzag down by the hospital. It takes you right into the center. Like most of the traffic goes right up into Main Street. And just one thought would be, and again, these are just provocations. They're not answers. They're not tested or anything. But the idea that could we, as we start to look at Main coming from the north, could we take things over onto Court? Again, that same idea. Let's clear out the middle for pedestrians and get the cars on the edges. Yeah.
And again, I mentioned it a minute ago, but what are complete streets if you don't know what those are? It's really just considering all of these different elements in a street roadway section so that you're considering not just having active sidewalks and cycling tracks, but making sure that we can get large trees to grow. Someone mentioned power lines a minute ago, having safe crosswalks, and just really thinking about all those elements very thoughtfully. So now we'll zoom into district recommendations, and this is where you come.
Oh, is it my turn?
It is yours. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. My turn. All right. So one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is can we start to break things down a little bit in terms of how the city is organized, okay? So this is kind of a new thing a little bit. I think there loosely are districts. When you look at the zoning map, for instance, in the uptown, there's a historic area around the uptown, and it's broken down a little bit differently than this. But we just tried to keep it really, really simple, okay? So what you'll see here is that we've got some mixed-use districts, and these should all kind of generally make sense to you since you know Marysville. Some residential areas, historic residential to the west, and then we've created what we're calling in the blue gateway zones, okay? This ties back a little bit to that, what I mentioned before about Main Street, and Maple's part of that as well. But there's kind of, in a sense, we're calling that kind of a north gateway zone and a south gateway zone. So those are kind of new.
And maybe a better way to say it is like, these are really character zones in our view, because when you look at a zoning map, it's hard to see how that translates to experience. So these were really more like experiential zones, really, right, when you think about it.
Thanks, that's right. So what we do is we start with these districts, and then that breaks down. So we've got the North Gateway, Mill Creek, Uptown Marysville, South Gateway. Those are ones specifically that we're going to be showing you ideas about, because we think there's a lot of potential in those zones. And what happens then is you get into neighborhoods, and that breaks down into what we're calling an education campus, North Village, Mill Creek Central, East and West, Uptown Core, Civic Campus. So we're breaking these things down. We'll go through this. This is kind of the way that we've organized things so that we go through this. And then ultimately, that will break down into more specific focus areas, which hopefully will make sense as we move forward in showing some of these ideas. So this idea of the pedestrian-focused core, we just talked about that. How can we get our downtown or uptown to be pedestrian-focused? So it feels almost like more. Sometimes, if you've been to German Village, it's wonderful just walking around German Village, and you feel like it's really, even though the sidewalks are up and down and all around, you really don't care because it's such a nice environment, right? So could we have something like that where instead of just going to uptown for a specific store, you just go down there because you just want to be in the uptown and you know it's walkable and safe and wonderful, right? And residential growth is really something that we need to address, going from just single-family apartments to mixed use, and then the green space we've been talking about. So this is a diagram. We're kind of upper right would be 33 on the perimeter coming in. The fairgrounds, does this have a pointer? It doesn't have a pointer on it. Anyway, we're calling North Village. Right there where in the green is, we're calling it Mill Creek Central, which is kind of where the silos, the water and light project is. You'll understand, of course, you'll recognize the uptown core in the red, what we're calling the Civic Campus, and then we've got Memorial Health. So that entire corridor we see as a corridor with tremendous opportunity. These areas are not, a lot of these areas are existing and they're developed. There's houses there, there's people that live there, we understand that. We're talking many years out. And some of this stuff will happen 20, 25 years out. Some of it may never happen, that's fine too. But we see opportunity here. Now switching your brain around, the silos is now down to the left, so we're kind of looking to the southeast more or less at those same areas. We're just zooming in a little bit more. You'll see that what we're calling the diversion onto Court Street, that we're calling the Court Street shift, so that we can get traffic, car traffic and truck traffic off of Main, and taking that down to London. We're showing the Civic Campus. We're showing some of the elements that would be part of that, and an expanded Partners Park. Zooming in again. So you'll see that structurally, there's things that obviously that set themselves up right now as fundamental and core, and we're not going to change, but a lot of this is about looking to the future just to modify it. So now we're looking at some of the first, okay, so if you walk through the lobby space and in here, you've seen some of these images, and it takes a while, even for me sometimes, to look at these and go, what am I looking at? So you'll see the word Uptown, 5th and Main, you'll see the courthouse and the silos to the right. So you know you're looking kind of to the northwest. And what we're showing here is some of the development that in 25 years from now, Marysville could look like this. Okay. So just to break this down a little bit, if you just look at the uptown core, there's some teeth missing, right? There's some sites there where buildings have fallen down that need to be replaced. There are some buildings that are like single story that should be multi-story. There are open spaces like parking lots that could have buildings in them if we accommodate the parking properly and those kinds of things. And this starts to show some of the specifics of that. Getting shade into the uptown, presently where the lighthouse is. Years ago there was a hotel, it was the Oakland Hotel. It burned down. We've got old pictures of it. It was kind of cool. It would be nice to recreate that in time. Make this much more pedestrian friendly and a lot more outdoor activation, that kind of thing. And then on the left, you'll see this is kind of what Marysville and the core is right now in terms of walk space and parking and green space. And you'll see, I think we've got 8 trees in the core, which you guys all know those 8 trees. One of them just got hit a couple of years ago, but still alive. But looking at this in another way, we've got multiple options where we just decided to show this one where we make the sidewalks much wider. We take some of that parking out of the core and put it to the perimeter in close proximity to the uptown, but not in the middle of it, so that we can make it more pedestrian and treed and shaded and all those kinds of things. And the percentage is on the right over there to show the difference. So this is an image. Again, it's dreaming, it's imagine. Remember the imagine word. So we're on Main Street looking north, and that is where the Lighthouse building is right now. It's a single-story building that was replaced the multi-story hotel. And right next to that, just to the left, I think it's a copy shop, which also is a single-story building. But in time, wouldn't it be great if those were multi-story? In other words, the fabric of that uptown core is multi-story, and that's what makes it what it is. So we've got some areas that either there's not a building there or that building really isn't appropriate for what we're trying to see for an uptown. And then that leads to tree-lined corridor, shopping, outdoor seating, active storefronts, all those things is what we would like to see, of course, in the future. Now going to our beloved Partners Park, and I say that with all respect. Our Partners Park is so well used. It's awesome to see people skating. Again, the farmers markets are fantastic and all the things we'll be able to do. But as our city grows, we want more of that, right? We really want more of that. So right now, our library sits on that site. We have parking on that site, and we have a historic building on the corner. I think it's one of the oldest buildings. What residences in the town is on the southwest corner. So those are hurdles. There's always issues like that have to be dealt with. But we're starting to imagine a Partners Park that is bigger, and also you'll start to notice on the edges of that, we're activating that with some new things. So as we look at this, you'll see from the air here, this is Main Street. Oh, I wish I had a laser here.
It says it there.
Main Street's over there, Plum Street. You can see the partner. And then we're starting to suggest walk-up townhomes and those kinds of things. We need more people living in the uptown. And so these are the activators on the edge. So over on the far side, on the west side, there's City Hall and making accommodation for City Hall to expand at some point, right? So we know in time it probably will need to expand, but that's not to say that you couldn't have some retail on the bottom floor. You could have offices up above and some retail. So that helps to activate the park, right? On the southwest side, just off the picture, one of the things we're showing is, could we have another hotel? When we went to Holland, they had, I think, 3 hotels or 4 hotels in the uptown. Yeah. We're talking about 2. And then the library being relocated to the south side, so it faces onto the park. It's still part of the civic core. And then up on the edge of the existing uptown, getting more activation there, more either renovating like the county building or adding a building so that there's activation that faces the park. And then the residential, as we've been suggesting. Again, there are homes there right now, and we'd love to preserve homes, but in terms of priority, we really think for the uptown to ultimately be successful, we need more people living there. And then this looks at Main Street South. So you'll see Memorial Hospital on the right. Up from that, you'll see Marysville Steel, which we'll talk about in a bit. We've got some images of that. And then we've got this uptown core is on the upper left. You'll see the silos way beyond that. And then this area between the uptown core and Memorial. To me, Memorial feels like it's not really connected to the uptown. It just never has. And it's not that many blocks away. And it really, it's one of our most important elements in our city. Memorial has been a very successful hospital. It's doing some great things. They're a great partner. They've helped with Partners Park and those kinds of things. So we're saying, can we make that more connected? And at the same time, can we start to think about other civic things? Like, say, for instance, our post office has been there for a long time. At some point, we may need a new post office, an updated library, and maybe there's a community center of some type. Maybe we can get some of our multinationals or whatever, maybe Nestle and Honda, and those people would like to be part of that. So on the right-hand side, you'll see this is a plan of what you just saw before, which is Partners Park at the top, City Hall expansion as we move to the south, hotel. There's a parking structure we're showing just south of the Methodist Church as a possible location for our parking structure that would help solve a lot of the parking issues, especially if we start taking some of that parking off of the streets. That would be very convenient. The library, a civic center, maybe some mixed-use retail, a post office. Again, this is all just dreamy stuff. Ed just sitting at his desk and drawing stuff and throwing it out there to the public is what I'm doing. But it doesn't seem like it's that crazy, actually, unless you tell me it is. And then this is a three-dimensional of just what I just talked about. Again, uptown on the left, Memorial on the other side, and this idea of connectivity and creating a civic core in the long term.
And I mean, maybe just to convey, because again, I didn't have as much history in Marysville as Ed, but one of the first things we did when we started working here is we just walked around a lot, me and the rest of the team. And to your point, the hospital doesn't feel terribly connected, and it's not that far to go from the hospital to the silo, but it's just not the best experience, and it doesn't feel like it's all part of the same fabric. And so I think that's really what Ed's after. If you go back, maybe you're more back, is this, right? It's just that connected fabric of city that welcomes, both ends of that, really like a dumbbell kind of effect.
Right. And then this is an image of Partners Park. So if you're on 7th Street looking westward, so it's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see the county building in the back, the county courthouse in the back there, an expanded Partners Park. And then you see the residential that would be on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, the new public library, which would face the park, something like that. And then Marysville Steel. The city has invested in purchasing some properties there. There was an opportunity and they took it. And so we see some potential there, and we're starting to show some ideas for what that could be. So this just kind of shows you some of what's existing there. We have a school in the vicinity up here, the city maintenance facility, which is a pretty good size piece of property that sits there to the lower right that has a lot of potential. The Stay Dry waterproofing and the grain wetting event center, that's all part of that. And then the two Marysville Steel buildings, one of which has been taken down. So as we zoom in on that, as we look kind of to the westward side, Dollar General's down there, kind of where it says, well, right, almost where it says Marysville Steel in black. So we're saying that could be like Depot Plaza. That's where the train used to come in. One of our train tracks came right through this diagonal right here, and then creating plaza space and activated space where there could be events. And the fact that I think the grain and wetting event center, I think is it being sold, or I heard something about it. So there's some change to it, I'm not sure. But at any rate, I think there's just a lot of potential here for having food and beverage establishments, maybe some kind of a game hall, those kinds of things. And so we're just looking at the potential of this for that. And also office and residential could be part of that too. That whole mixed use idea versus just having a couple single uses, mix that up such that people are always there. They're always going to the coffee shop, they're always going to the restaurant, and that ties in with other parts of the city.
I was just going to bring up just a couple points too. You know, like, so this was the old rail line, right, that's turning into the trail in this area. The city's already invested in a small piece of that trail just to the east, right, of this image, there's part of it.
Yeah.
And so this idea that, again, all these images are really meant to build off of the things that are happening, build off of some of the vision that's already been established for some of these areas, and just really paint the picture for the future. The other thing I would mention too is all of these that show these more pedestrianized centers. If you'll notice, we're always thinking about parking and where those parking wants to be strategically located, because we know that it has to be a part of the solution. So hopefully you're getting the point too that we're thinking about where that consolidated parking needs to go in these areas.
Right. This is a big one. This is, okay, now we're going up. 33 is at the top of this, and then we're coming down to Milk Creek, which would be where the silos are, the Water and Light project. And so what we're looking at here is the area that primarily is Marysville Estates on the right, and the fairgrounds to the left. This is an area looking from the other direction. So the STEM school is off to the right, and the high school is off the page. Main Street is the main diagonal coming right through the middle. And so we're just calling it North Village West, North Village East. There's been discussion about the fairgrounds. I know it's a very delicate subject. I've been told that. I've been told by people don't even show anything about the fairgrounds. We're not suggesting the fairgrounds goes away. If it's there for 50 or 100 years, no problem. It's not a big deal. But if something does change, that site is critically important because it has amazing access to the uptown. It has amazing access off of Maple Street and Main Street. So it's hard not to look at those areas and say, you know what if? You know, what's the potential of these? So the fact that we don't have a bridge park, we could have a bridge park or something like that, right? People are always saying there's not enough to do. The little kids say it, the high school kids say it, the residents say it, there's not enough to do in Marysville. And even the corporate people that come to Marysville, and there's a lot of them that come here, they don't stay here, they go to Dublin. They go to Bridge Park, that's where they go. They may stay there overnight, they stay in a hotel there, and they go to the amenities that are in Dublin. And wouldn't it be nice if we kept them here? So whether it's this or something else, there's a great deal of potential. That site on the right is about 40 acres. Everything on the left is about 70, 75 acres. That's a lot of land, and so there's a tremendous amount of potential there. And then if you zoom in on that, you start to think about, again, this village mixed use kind of thing. And when we say that, you go, well, yeah, there's a lot of cars there, but think about it. If you lived there and you could work there and you could be entertained there, you don't have to get in your car. And if we start to tie into Mill Creek as a connector, this is on Mill Creek. I mean, these people could literally If you live here, you can just jump on your bike or your little, your Segway or whatever you want to take, and you can get anywhere in town. It's really pretty cool, And also within that, there would be parks, just like, as you look at areas like this, if it's 70 acres, you need open space. You can't just pack everything in there. But this provides for a variety of different kinds of housing, different scale buildings, like maybe toward the center where there's more entertainment, maybe it gets a little taller, but it doesn't mean that everything needs to be tall. Some of it could be single family. There's this idea of these courtyard clusters. What do we call those? I'm trying to remember.
Cottage courts.
Cottage courts, where you've got small houses, but you have smaller sites and you design them around a courtyard. And you can do things like that are, I think, pretty creative. So there could be townhomes, there could be condominiums, all kinds of different kinds of housing. And then as we look at North Main, there could be retail along North Main as an extension. So now we get into the Mill Creek Corridor. The Mill Creek Corridor, as we said before, it's got tremendous opportunity. Here's a little sketch where we started to think about it differently. Like right now, it's kind of there, and some of this land isn't all owned, certainly. We're looking at it as if we could control it all. But we've got South Mill Valley up here, which influences it, the high school. We're talking about a potential development called Mill Creek West. I'll talk about that in a minute. MacGyver Woods and Oakdale Cemetery, which is a green space, which could tie into that. The North Gateway, which we just talked about. And then over on the far right, there's Marysville East, and then Scott's Farms up there. So there's a lot of things that tie into that, okay? And so if you start to think about it a little bit, and this is going to the extreme in terms of all the programming that can happen, but we just kind of went crazy with it. Like, what could happen along there? Next to the high school, there could be active recreation, extreme sports, an amphitheater. Or if you get over into this area here, maybe you have outdoor classrooms. Maybe there's a nature center, those kinds of things. So Mill Creek really could become kind of, in a sense, beachfront for development. Instead of putting low-value development next to high-value green space, we need to put high-value development next to high-value green space is kind of the premise. And then this starts to show a little bit about what that could be in terms of Mill Creek, what we're calling Mill Creek West. This is a property that is currently owned by the city. The Bark Park is there, and there's some other buildings there. I think there might even be a county building in there. Some people would probably know that. I don't know the specifics. But that's a pretty good size plot of land. And it's right next to our amazing Mill Creek. So a sketch looking kind of from the other direction. So Four Paws is right where the purple circle is to the right. And so there's Schwarzkopf Park. To the top of the page is a STEM school and the high school. And then we've got our green space. And there could be rec center. One of the things that's been talked about is like, hey, we need a new pool, right? We want to have an additional pool. Well, maybe if we had the right developer who was willing to partner with us, maybe they would help pay for that, for instance. And maybe that could be part of a rec center or some kind of amenity that's a community amenity, but at the same time, we find a partner to help us pay for it, those kinds of things. Parking along the edge where the railroad is, and then high-value development next to our green space.
Maybe if I could mention just one thing, like,
Yeah.
one of the places we toured was the Quarry Trails development, if you haven't seen that, near Columbus. And they basically built a mixed-use housing development next to a metro park. And our feeling was like, well, Mill Creek really is your metro park. I mean, in a sense, right? And so right now, there's a lot of underutilized space. Sometimes it's the back of buildings. It's the service area of some of the buildings that are along there. How does it become the front of something? And I think this illustrates how we could really take advantage and start to face the peak, right? You're in good shape. Yeah, I think we only got a few
We're
more
getting close to the end.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, this is another crazy one, okay? I can't help it, MacGyver Woods, talking with Donald, and I did some research on this. Dr. MacGyver was quite the person. Anybody know about Dr. MacGyver? I mean, the guy was, it seems like he was kind of like a Renaissance man. He was involved in the community for many, many years. He had this beautiful property here, and he traveled the world, and he went to Scotland and brought back stones and all kinds of crazy, just cool stuff. And so, thus, we have the MacGyver Woods Nature Preserve over here. But the unfortunate part about it is, like, I hardly even know it's there personally, and I've lived here a long time. And you can park in the parking lot, and then you can find a pathway, but it's kind of hidden, And then on the left-hand side or the north side of 5th Street, we have the Oakdale Cemetery, which is going to be on the historic registry.
It's already on.
It's on the historic registry. It's got, and it just became an arboretum. Okay, so that's a pretty amazing green space. I mean, growing up in Iowa, I would go to some of the older towns where my wife was from, for instance, and on a Sunday we would walk through to have a really nice walk, we'd walk through the cemeteries because they're just beautiful landscapes, right? And you see some of these old stones. I don't know how many people walk through there, but we've got this beautiful preserve, and we've got that beautiful cemetery over there. And right now, I think it's planned for like a commercial along 5th Street. So we just threw out the idea: what if we had some kind of a heritage center there? What if we put a civic use there that ties those two treasures together and makes something out of both of them, more than what's existing? So again, may never happen, but these are the kinds of things that we put in front of you, the community, to provoke discussion. These are not answers, these are possibilities. Is it your turn?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And we're almost done.
Okay, good.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're not done after this. There are next steps. So, again, this is meant to paint a picture for what these areas could look like. It doesn't mean they're all going to look this way, because once a developer or somebody gets involved, things start to get shaped a certain way. But what is important is to establish and modernize a zoning code that starts to allow for these types of mixture of uses to happen and starts to incentivize them in a way. So that would be a next step of our phase. We also need to develop architectural guidelines and design standards that more clearly define what these are, as we heard from some of the interviews with the developers. Tell me what those want to be, and I will try to achieve those, right? And so when you're unclear about what you're really after, that's where some of that muddiness comes. So we want to be clear. We want to establish standards, establish guidelines, and then get that implemented into the zoning so that hopefully you can see the fruits of this vision plan. There's also a lot of other things that need to happen, right? So there's partly city responsibility, partly community responsibility. As Ed talks a lot about, the community conversation shouldn't end here. We've done about a year of them, and they should continue just like this. Public-private partnerships need to be established. We've been starting to develop a group of public and private sector that starts to meet at that workshop, that starts to talk about some of the things that could get implemented. How do we establish and find financial tools to do so? How do we be thoughtful about the growth? And then obviously, last but not least, looking at all the other initiatives that are happening. We know the city is and county is doing an economic study right now that we want to be involved with, that we've already had meetings with. Some of the ideas we have, actually, they are talking about, like expanding and livening Uptown is a good economic driver for the city. Having a hotel in the Uptown, they talked about, is something that they're thinking about. So the economic study, I think, will prove some of the things that we're talking about, that it's good planning. And so those were some of the bigger things that we're trying to move forward with our group with the city and the council. Again, I can't emphasize enough community conversations just like these, where people can voice their opinions. And just leaving you with this, just imagine the possibilities. That's really what this is all about. So if we have any questions, we could maybe turn the lights back on and get the mics back out. It looks like we have about 20 more minutes.
Thanks for your patience. That's a lot of slides.
Yeah. Thank you. And we can go back to any slide if anybody wants to.
I want to get back to when you were talking about particularly developing in the uptown. In the uptown, and then in the downtown area of Marysville, and I didn't see any multi-level parking.
Oh, there was.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. We probably jumped over it a bit. I had mentioned just south of the Methodist Church, we had shown the possibility of a structure in that location.
Okay. I was just concerned because looked like we were taking up a lot of real estate where people have to walk.
Yes. Is there I thought it was in the three-dimensional.
In the sketch?
What?
In the sketch plan?
In that three-dimensional.
In this, or?
No.
We do have it. I'm trying to find it.
Keep going.
I believe it.
Right there.
Yeah, right
it
here.
shows up. There it is.
Off to the left there, yeah. Right here.
I wish we had a pointer, but I don't know if you can see it or not. Right where it says hotel and just to the left of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We showed one. We also showed one over by the hospital. Again, we're just picking sites and saying strategically, thinking that, for Marysville Steel to be successful, maybe there's somebody from the hospital. Oh, Craig's here. He can tell. Say yes or no. Maybe there's a partnership with the hospital. Maybe they need more parking, but it could also serve as part of the parking for the civic area and Marysville Steel. So and I think the third one we were looking at is one that's going to be somewhere close to where the Amtrak station might happen. So those are the three possible sites that we've looked at so far, but those don't necessarily be the only ones.
And maybe to expand on that too, one of the things we learned in Holland was that when they diverted traffic around the core of their town, those diverted roadways, they built 2 structured parking on both of those. So basically what happens is people know exactly where to go and park, and then it's a very short walk into the core where it's a lot more pedestrian friendly.
Yeah, good question. Others? Jonathan, you had some?
I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about how some of these decisions were made as it relates to what you heard from the community. I know that small town feel was really important. Can you talk about why maybe some of the specific pieces of this came together with that in mind?
Go ahead.
You want me to take that one?
If you want to start,
yeah, sure.
I'll jump in.
No, I think, again, I keep tying a lot of this back to that trip that we all took, but I think when we heard from the Holland representatives that expanding their downtown was one of the most important things they did, which created that more walkable center, I think that is probably the biggest thing we thought was it becomes a destination so that people want to park and get out and walk around. And so by expanding that core, we create the walkability that really adds to that small town character, because now there's other businesses that can build off of each other. When we talk with small businesses and you ask them what would they like to see the most of, they say more businesses, because they know that when someone comes to a destination, that helps the next person next to them. If everyone's just trying to drive and park as close to a front door, get in and out of the car as fast as possible, they're not strolling around and they're not supporting the other businesses.
Right. Also, in terms of decision making and what we decided to show too, if you look at the uptown core, if you go to the west, there's churches there, there's the county courthouse, all that kind of thing. That's already a civic zone that's pretty well established. You're not going to really want to change that. As you go to the east a little bit, there may be some places along the way a little bit there, but then you get to residential. So that's where, as we start to analyze and look at where the opportunities are, that's where the Main Street corridor seemed to be where it made the most sense. And it wasn't just sprinkled around. It was actually a concentrated area that we could tie everything together. And that connectivity, both in terms of the Mill Creek corridor and kind of the urban fabric, is really important, that things feel like they're connected. So that's kind of why too.
Maybe one more thing, sorry to keep building on this, but we also looked at the strategic acquisitions that the city has already made. So like something like Marysville Steel, where they have that property, that's a very short-term win that could happen in the near future. We also looked at some of the other properties, like the Hometown Auto site, like that can add residents in the uptown, like in the next 5 years, let's say, if somebody does that. So we were really looking at those strategic sites too that are already in control that could move quicker, which would add some short-term wins to build this long-term plan.
Yeah, Jeremy? Oh, go in.
A lot of interesting stuff, Ed. A lot of good stuff. Excuse me. I guess a concern, the notion about making the 5th Street corridor pedestrian friendly, maybe bicycle friendly, with all, promoting a lot of development along the Main Street corridor, and what we see means traffic, means more traffic. And I don't see where that traffic's going to go. Got 4th and 6th is really the only 2 options.
Yeah.
I'm concerned if that's going to happen, the 8th Street corridor to the east. I'm a proponent of tying that into Dunham Avenue. And I think we need to look further south for east-west connectivity. Just, again, I'm kind of blown away by what we're seeing tonight. It is kind of difficult to follow just because you're looking at
Turning different ways.
different directions and whoa, you know.
Yeah, sorry.
It's just the mind doesn't work that way or doesn't
Yeah.
work that fast. At least mine doesn't.
No, sometimes. I do.
So anyhow, a lot of good stuff. Just I think there's a lot of discussion that's going to be needed.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, and I appreciate that. In fact, I'm glad I got that critique because that is exactly what we need. In other words, this is to provoke, and it provoked you to say there might even be a better way. And you know what? There is a better way. And this whole idea of circulation and traffic really needs to be studied. But we do know what we're trying to do is we want it walkable in the court. How do we make that happen? So I'm sure there's some...
I had never thought about the development of North Main Street to the east of North Main Street, where the mobile home park is and that area. It never dawned on me to think about that. But
Yeah. Yep, thanks.
Kind of to go off of that too, how many of these, sort of vision topics do you think we can start to implement through, capital improvements through the city versus being reliant on a developer to come and say, we want to build this hotel or we want to build this mixed use space versus we want to start changing the roadway patterns? Like how much, if you build it, they will come to start building the building blocks for that?
I don't know if I've got a good answer for that one. I think it's a discussion that we would need to have with Terry and Ashley and Kyle a little bit. I mean, there's just a certain amount of money. I mean, I kudos to the city for being bold and purchasing some of these properties that are kind of low-hanging fruit, giving us the opportunity to do something in the future that sets us up. But they've only got so much in terms of funding. And so I think that's where one of the things that we've been talking about is taking this opportunity and rather than, like Connect Realty kind of approached us, or at least that's my take on it, or whatever. Like we could go and start to show some of these ideas and say, who are the best developers in Central Ohio or beyond, and saying, how do we get this flywheel going? Can we create these partnerships, pursuing the people that we want here, knowing that they've already built quality, versus somebody that we don't know that just wants to take a site and do something with it. So it's a good question, and I don't have an answer for it yet.
I'll add just on the public side and back to those green slides from the beginning. But the city already is planning for the roundabout at the 5 Points.
That's true.
They already are looking at the 5th Street improvements, and I think maybe some of our ideas might impact that study, that design that's happening right now. So like some of these things are actually ongoing improvements that are happening that could now start to buy into some of these ideas. So there's probably both public and private side that could move, right, with the private sites and then also those public improvements. It's not like they have to wait, they're happening right now.
Right. I think that's something that's going to come out as we go into this next phase 3. That'll be right at the top. Is like where are the near-term opportunities, and I call it the flywheel. How do we get that going in the right direction so we actually start to see the fruit of what we're talking about up here?
There also may be an opportunity to focus on preparing what's here now, so that when these opportunities present themselves, we'll be prepared for it. And it may seem a little, but I think of the young gentleman behind me who had problems riding his bike down these sidewalks in Old Marysville. They're in bad shape, and if we want people to consider this pedestrian friendly, they're far afield on some of the streets, and we really need to take a look at what we have now, and an opportunity to spend what we have now would be, I just think that would be a good idea to fix what we have first.
I think that's part of what's good about having a vision, because then if you do start to make investments now, it's towards something, as opposed to kind of looking at things in a piecemeal approach. So again, hopefully this helps the city help make those strategic investments that lead towards some future vision. So,
Jeremy.
I have the microphone. Is it on here?
Yep.
Yeah. So first of all, I just think the city should be applauded for the vision. It's very exciting. It's really inspiring to see some of these things. And so, as someone who's lived here for 19 years, I would say I'm really excited about all of these things. My question, I think, is in relationship to excellence being a core value. Excellence always requires accountability. There's no excellence without accountability. So how does that process work out? Because we can all sit here and say, wow, these are really exciting things. Who is accountable in that process? Maybe how did Holland see that? I see collaboration, but then there's some execution that's necessary on that, and there has to be accountability to the execution. And if that doesn't take place, then the excellence never happens.
Right.
So how does that process, how do you see that process working out?
Yeah, well, I think that's something that needs to be talked about because we're throwing in this out as an aspiration and something that we feel is essential. But it's really, a lot of it has to do with the community. And again, I think one of the things I think is really important is that we start to set up infrastructure so that we can have these conversations, so more people feel like you guys do. You're here tonight. This isn't just a presentation, this is an invitation, right? So we need the community to step up and say, we want this. And if you don't, there will not be accountability, right? I mean, community groups can be formed. When we went to Holland, there were probably at least, 5, 6, 7 different kind of community groups. Some were about bikeways, some were about their downtown. They had all these different constituencies they had an ODC, it's called an Outdoor Discovery Center.
Network? Yeah.
Yeah, and they were networked throughout everything that was going on in the city. There were advocates for that. And I think that's what I would think. I mean, if we look again at Holland, we keep talking about Holland, but again, they're a lot like us, and we can learn a lot from them. Those groups actually kept everybody else, they keep each other accountable. It starts with that, I think. And I think people need to feel like they're empowered to speak up and have a voice. And I think what we're trying to do with this vision is give you some ammunition or some ideas that you get excited about. Say, I'm for that, and I'm going to speak up. So that's one way.
One other thing I'll
ahead.
add is the slide on the next steps is really important. We have to get this established into the zoning code. We have to develop guidelines and standards around these ideas so that it's very clear about what you want to see. And so that's why we need to keep moving in this process. So like Ed says, I actually just look at this as the beginning. It's not the end of something, it's the beginning. And so we have to continue to engage and start to get that implemented.
Right. Go ahead, sir.
Beautiful. All of it's beautiful. Accountability, like Jeremy said, this is more of a visioning question for our officials, both at the county and city level. How are we going to look at the change in the tax structures that is at the State House right now in relationship to our schools? And then second, how do we look at that 18 vision plan, master plan, whatever it's called, and show our constituents what we've done well as part of that to help launch this plan into the future?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, one of the things, again, we'll go back to infrastructure. One of the things that the city has done really well that really need to be touted is how they've created infrastructure that attracts the development that we're seeing. We're land rich. That's one of the things about Marysville. Because we're land rich, and also we have really good utility infrastructure. And those are the things that when developers are looking to come here, that they look for that. Those are just like fundamental things, and a lot of communities do not have that. So anyway, we need to be cognizant of that and continue to do the positive things that the city has been doing.
Okay, just real quick. I wanted to talk a little bit about Holland and how they've evolved, which is amazing. But we've kind of started in a slow way evolving in that direction. And let me give you a few examples. We're very fortunate to have somebody like a Bruce Daniels who invests like he does in some of the projects that have taken place here in our uptown. We also have Connect that we've talked about on the silo site that is interested in investing over $100 million on a 17-acre site. That's awesome, and that's a game changer. Lastly, and somebody that's sitting here tonight, is the New Albany Company. When the New Albany Company comes to Marysville with the thought of developing an area like Marysville East, is there possibilities for a company like that to see the evolution of what's going on in our uptown and being willing to invest in areas like we've shown tonight? So it's securing the interest of those type of companies, because Ed, Carmine, you guys saw it as well as I. Mm-hmm. Those investors in Holland, Michigan, were contributing millions upon millions of dollars, and it didn't rest just on the city. It was those investors that made that happen.
Yeah. Terry, that is a super critical point. Thanks for bringing that up because, hopefully what this vision can really help with is to have be a tool for those conversations. In other words, we're showing our city our leadership as a city saying, we want this. This is us. This is our DNA. This is where we want to go. And if you want to be part of this, let's talk. But it's also a filter for those saying, well, I just want to do this. Like, does that fit with where we want to go? I'm sorry, it really doesn't. You might want to go to, I won't mention another town, London. I live in, go to London or whatever, something like that.
Well, and maybe just to add, I mean, I can't emphasize that the culture of collaboration is what we learned about in Holland. The public-private sector, they developed a community group that included public and private sector leaders to have casual conversations like we've talked. So it wasn't always like a big public meeting when they were, waiting to have these conversations. They made phone calls, when they're thinking about things. So I think just having that kind of relationship with the development community is huge. And I think you can do that.
Yeah, Clancy?
I don't need a microphone. Who owns the fairgrounds?
The fairgrounds, as I understand it, Terry can probably correct. I think it's a privately owned entity. Is that right, Terry?
That's correct, yes. I'm not sure what the organization's name is. Steve, do you know? Steve Stolby might know better than I.
It's owned by the, what's called Union County Agricultural Association, something like that.
Yep.
And it's a private group?
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's like a 501c something.
There has been interest expressed to the city from a major developer on the fairgrounds site. I think what they're watching right now is the evolution of the silo development site, because as things continue to move to the north, that major developer may have more of an interest in the fairgrounds site in the not too distant future.
Would that developer be interested in providing a new fairgrounds?
That would all be, part of the discussion would be what they ultimately would pay for the fairground site would be utilized to purchase land for that, whatever that new site would be. So that's an example, but there has been some interest.
Yes, I was in Hudson, Ohio yesterday. That's a neat little town. It's got a nice downtown area.
Yeah.
And my feeling is, I think if we're talking about putting hotels in or other structures, obviously Hometown Center, that area can go very soon. Let's make it, yes, modern as can be inside, but have the outside mix stay with the same architectural structure as what's in the downtown now, because that was what is going to make us feel like that small town and keep that continuity.
100%. Mm-hmm. I agree. We have to have the right people designing those buildings. Julie, did you?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into what I was going to say. I wanted to get back to the small town feel. The gentleman isn't here anymore, but because it's so important, and I was part of this design process, and I know that's something that we discussed at length, like what does that mean? Mm-hmm. I think another thing, overall is the use of civic spaces, mixed use, things like that, that really were people-centered. The idea of our interpretation, a small town feel, was really about the people and the interactions. And so I think an overlying perspective was creating spaces that promote those kind of connections. Mm-hmm. One thing that was really important to me through this process was not just the connectivity of our trails, which is super important, but the connections between people. And I think these types of spaces help promote that. I think it is important to have these ongoing conversations, what this means to all of us and what is that small town feel and the flexibility of that to encourage that. But for me, it's all about the connectivity between people, and that's going to help these conversations to continue, as you discussed, to help this vision as we move forward.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Yes, sir?
Real quick, you mentioned earlier that these slides would be available to the public.
Yep.
If they are, when and how do we get them?
Well, that's
Website, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're working to develop a website for this where links to both of the booklets that Ed talked about will be, and more information about how to get involved in some of the community groups that Ed's talking about. We're working with the city right now to develop something like that so it can be released to everyone.
And probably within, what, a
I would
month?
think, yeah, within the next couple of months.
Hope as soon as possible.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, sir.
You mentioned a house at 117 or something.
Yeah.
Is that open to the public?
Yeah, you have to maybe schedule with us because we're not there all the time. We always go get the little green key from the from City Hall, and then we walk over there and lock it. But yeah, in there is all of our. You walk in there, it's just plastered with all of our stuff.
But we
and
set
it's
up
open.
meetings with people all the time, so
Yeah,
like
we
all
do.
you need to do is reach out.
We want that. We want those conversations with people. So if you're interested, Donald, would you like to say something?
I just want to say thank you to everybody who came tonight and has participated in this plan as long as it has been moving forward. And it just shows you that your representation is working for you. And really, the reason why I love government and love democracy is because it's you, it's us, it's together. We're creating this change. We're building something better for our children and the legacy of who we are and what are we going to leave for the next generation. Because we have to remember, the politicians before left a legacy for you all to call Marysville home. Now it's our job to create a new legacy for what are we going to leave behind. And that is what government is all about. Small increments of change every day to make the lives of our citizens a little bit better than what they were the day before. And I just want to say thank you to every single one of you. And this process has been exciting. It's been riveting, in my opinion. And I can't thank you guys enough. I can't thank the city enough. Everybody who's been involved in this. And I think it all deserves one more round of applause, to be honest with you, because this is
It is 8:03. I heard the bells.